Coming up on Theater Talk.
I had a wonderful partner who every once in a while I'd say, about 4 people in the world will get that joke. And he would say, more than enough. So
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, there is a play, Billy and Ray, that is the backstory of Double Indemnity.
Yes, and in fact, Susan, I was at Barnes & Noble the other day, and they have the American Film Institute's top 100 movies. And among the top 100 American films is the great Fred MacMurray, Edward G. Robinson, Barbara Stanwyck movie, Double Indemnity. And Billy and Ray, a new play by Mike Bencivenga.
Beautifully said.
Thank you very much.
That grandfather is smiling in heaven.
Is the story of how Billy Wilder, the director, and Raymond Chandler, the writer of the screenplay, put together Double Indemnity. It opens soon here in New York. Susan, at what theater?
At the Vineyard Theater.
At the Vineyard Theater. And it is directed by, this newcomer to the theater scene, newcomer to showbiz, Garry Marshall.
yes, my name is easy to say.
Right, exactly.
My real name is Masciarelli. You don't have to say that. I'm Marsh.
Precisely. Welcome, Mike and Garry, to Theater Talk. All right, Mike, what got you interested in the behind-the-scenes story of this great American movie?
Well, I'm a huge Billy Wilder fan, and I had always heard that they had some squabbles while they wrote Double Indemnity, and then I said, let me do some research on this. I'll try to find out how true it is. A lot of Hollywood legends, you find out they're not true at all. Well, this one was more than true. They really, really disliked each other. I was able to go through the archives, the Paramount archives they have at the Academy of Motion Pictures, and read every draft, every lunch menu, every memo, all the back and forth and all that, and it was fascinating and also hilarious. And one of the things that attracted me about the piece was, besides that I wanted to do a piece about collaboration, was many true stories are not funny. Most true stories you see, even if they're about comedians, they turn tragic or dramatic or whatever. But I thought, well, here's a chance. I love comedy, and I love Wilder's comedies. And I said, here's a way to do a true story about collaboration, that sort of thing, and it's funny.
That's a comedy.
It's a comedy.
Now, Garry, did you know Billy Wilder? You must have known him.
I met him. I was not the biggest fan of Billy Wilder, but I'm a fan of anybody who gets laughs. And so anybody who got as many as he, I have stolen from and learned from.
He directed the movie voted the funniest movie of the 20th century.
Some Like It Hot.
Some Like It Hot.
You say he was at the edge of polite. I was talking to a friend of mine, Tita Khan, the widow of Sammy Khan, and she was very close to Billy Wilder. And she told me this line, this was Billy Wilder's definition of anti-Semitism. Hating Jews more than is absolutely necessary. That was the old Billy Wilder. So take us back. So Double Indemnity was a book written by James M. Cain.
Yes.
How did Raymond Chandler then wind up writing the screenplay?
Well, Billy Wilder had a partner named Charles Brackett, and they had written Anochka. They wrote a bunch of wonderful films, Ball of Fire with Barbara Stanwyck. And Charles Brackett was a very cultured guy. He was a reviewer for The New Yorker. He was a theater reviewer for The New Yorker.
That's right.
Very cultured man. And Billy was a rough and tumble kind of New York, Berlin reporter. So they were sort of an unusual couple, and they would fight like crazy, Brackett and Wilder. And the producer, Joe Sistrom, who's one of the characters in our play, bought the Double Indemnity book, read it, and thought, this is great. This is going to be terrific. Then he sent it to the censors, and the censors said, there's no way we're going to make this movie. The lead characters are adulterers, and then they murder the husband, and they cheat an insurance company. It's like the 3 no-nos of all time. Brackett walked away. Right. Brackett said, this is too low even for me. He said, I am not going to do this. It's trash. So they said they needed Billy was self-conscious about his English, because even though he spoke clearly, he didn't know he couldn't finesse the language as well as he'd like.
Right.
And he liked to have a partner, as he said, no spark, no sparkle. If you don't have somebody to bounce the ideas against. So he said, get me a mystery writer. So they got this
And James M. Cain, we should say, was under contract to somebody
to
else.
20th
Yeah.
Century Fox,
Yeah.
right?
He wasn't available.
He wasn't available, and so they got this somewhat known mystery writer at that point named Raymond Chandler.
Yes.
Was writing for Black Mask magazine, getting paid $300 a story, and had not yet had a book published, and he needed money badly. Was thinking about trying to be in Hollywood, and so they came together, and it was a marriage made
He sounds
in hell.
like the description of Raymond Chandler sounds like William Holden in Sunset Boulevard,
Yeah.
the broken down writer who needs money
true.
badly in
He
Hollywood.
was.
He was.
Needed money badly, and he, was in the war, World War I, and so he had a little bit of shell shock. They didn't know what to call it in those days, but
Right.
it's very prevalent now. And it was also a period in the 43, 44 where it takes place where alcoholism was not really known as such a disease. It was mostly you saw alcoholics as comic figures in movies. Leon Arrow would, let's have a drunk, it'll make it funny. But Raymond Chandler
He was a
also,
massive alcoholic.
And when he started with Bill, writing the movie with Billy, he was dry. He'd sobered up.
Yes.
Yes.
But
Allegedly.
Billy drove him back to the well.
Yes.
Sadly drove him back, but gave him a career. As Gary was saying, there wasn't a sensitivity at that time to. There hadn't been films about alcoholics. In
Well,
fact,
and am I jumping ahead in the story that ironically, then Wilder later based the Lost Weekend
yes,
On
he
Raymond
was
Chandler.
interested.
Chandler.
He selected that book because he would never quite say it was about Chandler, but he said, I know a thing or two about dealing with drunken writers.
Gary, let me ask you, you are a great director of comedies, and you've worked with some of the great comic actors. What is the secret to playing a drunk and making it funny? I mean, when you must have done scenes over the years where an actor has to be drunk. Is there a direction you give somebody to play drunk?
I direct a lot as a pointer. I say, let me see you do drunk. I said, don't do that, don't do this, do that. Then I point and I go home. But sometimes you have to do it sensitive, and every year, I've been doing this a minute, and every year there's a new rule. You can't make fun of this now, you can't make fun of that. I've been...
Remember the old comic Foster Brooks, who made
yeah.
a living?
Yes, Foster Brooks.
It was hilarious, but now if you look at that stuff, most people would be deeply offended by the comedy.
No, you can be just a little buzz on now, but the really drunks, they're not funny anymore because there's too many serious problems.
Well, and you're not laughing at Chandler in this play.
More of the comedy is in the friction,
Yeah.
which causes him to sort of go, further over the.
Yeah, I think you saw once I did Odd Couple. I played friction. I've had 7 partners, so I
Like
know what
went
it's
and got him. He went and got me.
No, actually, a lot of this is to my daughter, Kathleen Marshall, not the one on Broadway, the one who runs the Falcon in L.A. Found some reading she went to and came home and said, I found a play you're going to like. You should direct it. I said, well, I don't direct much theater. No, you should do it at the theater. And I read it, and I just said, I know how to do this. And I met him.
Do you
I was a very happy man.
But do you say you know how to do that because you had some connection to, you must have dealt with actors who lived in that Hollywood. You must have had some connection to that world in which the play is, that Hollywood in which the play is set.
Yeah, well, he does wonderful research. So I worked at Paramount for 12 years in the restaurant Oblat's. I ate in Oblat's. I went there. I knew the whole place. I know Stage 19, which there's a picture of in the background of the set I shot Happy Days on. So it was familiar to me. But I think the fact that it was both funny and sad at the same time, underneath Billy, who is funny in this, but it was during the 40s and his parents were still over in Europe and he was trying to get them out, but there were people who said this Nazi thing will go by and
pass.
well, so there's a wonderful underneath of this play that gives it.
Is there, Mike, a sense, did they have any knowledge at all that they were making what would be considered a classic, or is it just yet another movie to crank out in the factory system back in those days?
Well, I think Billy really wanted to make something daring, and that's why he grabbed onto it. I mean, everything about it was forbidden to do.
Right.
So they literally had to invent so many things that became stock and trade to film noir, the narration, which helps you get over the certain bumps in the story. You could say the tough talking, sexy talk without saying, you know,
Let's have sex.
let's have sex. You could say anything but that. And you know, all the how fast was I going, officer? 45 miles an hour. Well, there's a speed limit in this town.
But they really invented the wheel on film noir.
They-
right?
But he also did the cutaway, which was
Right.
That's
no,
what tells
that's how you got through the sense. If you
Yeah.
cut away to something, which we all do a lot now. But he also came from Europe, so he
Right.
believed in not the bright lighting. You know,
Right.
you talk to anybody in comedy, you got to be able to see it, light it up. This is not such a lit.
Well,
you
he-
don't have to see it. And he said, I want a little different kind
And
of
he would have
lighting.
grown up, he would have been, I guess, a contemporary perhaps of you know, great directors like Fritz Lang.
Lang,
so the
exactly.
shadows.
Yeah,
and
it does
the
look like
angles,
Am
all
in
of
that
those
way.
things.
And he was for a short
Lubitsch.
Yeah,
was
Lubitsch,
part.
yeah.
And Lubitsch. And he was also von Sternberg and those guys. He was in Berlin. He was in Vienna, but then he worked for UFA in Berlin for a short time and met all those guys. And they actually got his first screen credits there that got him to America. And also his idea was, he said it should be like a newsreel. It's like the newsreel should be over, and this movie should feel like the room is really dark. If somebody walks in a room and they don't necessarily turn on the light, they make a drink. You see Fred McMurray in a dark room pouring the drink. And people were like, they didn't even shoot things like that. Everything, like Gary's saying, was so brightly lit.
Fast.
Even the dramas were so, you know, everything was like, oh, Barbara Stanwyck, she looks terrible. There's shadows across her face. Oh, you can't do that thing in silhouette. That looks terrible. Where's the lighting? And so they really were pushing the directing elements of it, and also certainly the story elements of it, because it was very daring.
I tried in the play, and I should mention I have a wonderful assistant director who did it with me at the Falcon in California named Joe Boari, who is whiz at lighting. He's a big star, by the way. He's in Jersey Boys. He plays Frankie Valli.
He plays Frankie Valli.
But he started with me, so I know him. So he becomes a star, signs an autograph, and then comes to work with us.
Brings you coffee.
Said, hello, Joe. He's wonderful, and he's part of what he's doing as we speak. We're
That's
here.
right,
Hello,
right here.
how are you?
He's working.
He's putting
the
the
trenches.
lighting.
Are you trying to echo or try to evoke the film noir in
Yes,
this play?
some of it in the play. I know it's not always known for the play, but because it's so organic to this piece, we're trying some lighting things at the Vineyard, and I think it'll be very interesting to watch.
The other thing I always found fascinating about Double Indemnity is I grew up watching Fred McMurray and My Three Sons.
Right.
And for me, Fred McMurray was, you know, a sitcom actor.
right.
And then you see Double Indemnity, or he's brilliant in, but The Apartment.
Right.
He was a great villain. Fred McMurray was a great villain.
Right. And both roles he got by accident.
Really?
Well, in Double Indemnity, a lot of the male stars didn't want to do it. And a lot of them were drafted. A lot of them were in the war. And he was one of the few leading men that was still in Hollywood, because it was 43 they started. They shot in 43. It was released in 44. And he was doing The Egg and I, and he was doing these Colbert comedies and that kind of stuff. And Wilder said, you know, it'd be great, because he'd seem like an everyday guy, and, you know, that gets lured into this dark web of something like that. And with The Apartment, he was doing My Three Sons, and Melvin Douglas was supposed to play Mr. Sheldrake, the boss, and he fell ill or something happened to him. And at the last minute, he said, I'll call up Fred McMurray. And McMurray was like, hey, come on, I'm playing a dad with 3 sons, and now I'm playing an adulterer and a cheat.
Yeah, but interesting enough, it was Raymond Chandler's idea to get, they were going to get another hard-boiled tough
Like
guy.
Alan Ladd or one of those kind of guys.
And Raymond Chandler said, I don't see him like that.
He was never crazy about Philip Marlowe being like Bogart. He liked Dick Powell.
Yeah.
Because he said he looks more like a sympathetic guy,
Right.
with more of a, you know, a soul, like a that would. He's trying to help people.
So
even
then
though he's
his
taking-
evil is more of a surprise.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice guys have a dark side.
yeah. That was his idea.
It's a message the public needs to hear. I'm sure.
Now, it's interesting, you said you wanted to write a play about collaboration.
Right.
Is it been both of your experience working in television and the theater that the best stuff comes from an atmosphere fraught with tension and hatred and screaming and yelling and fighting? Is that how it was on the set behind the scenes of Happy Days, Garry?
No, you don't need, I'm not so much for all the fighting, but you need different opinions, or else it doesn't work. You have the same opinion, you don't get anything. But he and I get along well, and I had many different partners, and all part of it was fighting. I guess the collaboration that was most violent was my sister Penny and I, because we were related, and she knew how to
So
yell.
would you fight on Laverne and Shirley?
A lot of fight.
Yeah.
People always say, "What was your toughest show?" Laverne and Shirley by far. Because when even now, I say, "All right, let's go home now. We'll talk about it tomorrow." I did it here with the play, and I did it on Laverne. But then Penny would come to my house, and we would
We'll talk about it
turn
now.
off the lights and make believe we weren't home. My wife would say, "Make believe," and she would not stop ringing the gate. And she's very smart, Penny, always right, but you don't want to work all the time.
Your experience with collaboration, I mean, tension is not a bad thing when you're trying to hammer out problems on a script or a set.
Billy Wilder said many, many brilliant things, and one of them was, I can't write something with somebody I agree with. He said, if two people are in a room and you agree on everything, then one of you is useless.
Right.
So it is, you can, like anything, I mean, this play is also a parable about our government and our society, where we're so we don't agree, so we can't get anything done. But the point is, you can get something done. Even these guys who personally disliked each other about various things, together found a third thing. They found a thing that made a brilliant screenplay by saying, all right, we won't do it that way, we won't do it this way, but how can we do it?
But there's something to be said, though, for working on a deadline. I mean, if you were working in the Hollywood system back then, as you with television,
I worked a lot of systems.
You've got to get it done.
Yes, but I think the thing you need to be fighting and arguing, but you need somebody not afraid to rewrite. I have worked with people who, we can't ever change anything. That's the way it is. That's what I want. That's no good. I think what I liked in most of my shows, and certainly in the theater, is I find that it really is important that you hear well, because we have some arguments now, and we're going to have an audience, and I'm going to say at the end, did you hear crickets at that part? Or I was wrong, you were right, look, it worked.
They laughed.
So the audience sometimes, and there is always, I had a wonderful partner who every once in a while I'd say, about 4 people in the world will get that joke. And he would say, more than enough. So once in a while, you got to do something for you. So there's got to be some that are just there, and that's the way it is.
Now, Wilder does it. No.
Look how they get along so well.
No, it reminds me of something I'm sure someone you knew. You remember Peter Stone?
Yes.
Peter Stone, the writer of Charade and a lot of Broadway musicals.
And 1776.
1776 and the Will Rogers Follies.
Didn't know him personally. But.
Yeah, he was a great guy, and he was a good friend of our show. And
Yes.
I remember, I'll never forget this. Peter was out of town doing a rewrite on Annie Get Your Gun, and he was in Washington, D.C. at the Kennedy Center. And he'd written a line for Sitting Bull. And Sitting Bull says, I'm Sitting Bull. And they say, what kind of an Indian are you? And Sitting Bull says, I'm a Sioux. And the line is, funny, you don't look Sioux-ish. Died at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And they wanted to pull that line out. They were screaming about that line. And Peter said, when it comes to New York, it's going to work. And the very first preview in New York, funny, you don't look Sioux-ish, gigantic laughter. Now, there's someone who understood comedy and understood the audience it was made for.
There are things that play in Kansas and L.A. even, and don't play in New York, and things that play in New York. So you got to pay attention where you are.
Yes.
That was worth it.
Good.
I want to go. You do make Wilder sound kind of brutal. I mean, in something which apparently did happen when Chandler Chandler goes off and says, "I'll write you a script," and brings it back, and
He threw it in his face.
right. What was that about?
I think some of it is that I'm half German and half Italian, and the worst side of me when I get all riled up is that German side, that very strict.
Or you want to kill people?
No, I don't want to kill people, but you know what I'm saying. There is a certain Teutonic, like
Wagnerian fierceness.
assuredness. So Wilder would be, it's not like this, it's like that, it's like this, it's like that, and he would be a bit that way.
I mean, he was making no effort to set up a working relationship with this guy.
No.
But he also, I think, Billy was offended since I direct and write. Directors don't like when the writer writes all the directions. To this day, I really don't like when the screenplay comes and she cries and tears come down the face. I'll tell you when the tears come down. Don't just write the dialogue.
The first script from Chandler was literally, he dreamt up this, the camera's moving across the lawn and looks in the window and sees someone peering, and Wilder was just like, this is the biggest bunch of junk I've ever seen in my life.
That was also a reason.
He said, just write the words. Just write, I say this, you say that. Because he wrote in master scenes. If you see his screenplays.
What does that mean,
A master scene is, it just says interior, apartment.
Right.
Frank walks in and says, hey, where's my
Makes me a
hat?
drink.
Now, we only have a couple minutes. Tell us about your cast.
The cast is really what is, you say, comedy, this and that. You got to get funny people. That's what you got to do, who can also do dramatic, because that's what this play is. And Vinny Kartheiser, you know, wasn't the funniest guy on Mad Men, but he's been around.
Pete, right? On Mad Men.
Pete Campbell, he was.
Yes.
Right.
And he's there, and then we needed some adversary worthy, and Larry Pine, who has been doing it for years, and
Wonderful
is
actor.
always
Wonderful actor.
solid.
Terrific. Wonderful
So
actor.
they
Broadway
play, you know, Billy and Ray, and we got, you know, Drew Gayling. I always say
Gayling.
Gerling. His name is Gayling. He's in Jersey Boys. He plays Gardino. He's very big. He plays the producer. And I've been a producer, so a lot of times say, well, I used to think. And so we talk. And the girl we just found is Sophie von Hasselberg, who I knew when she was 4 years old and used to carry her around in beaches. She was Bette Midler's daughter, and she was 4. She
In real
talks.
life.
In
Yeah.
real
In
life.
real life. Doug Abel, who runs the Vineyard, had seen her in a showcase, and she's just wonderful.
Right.
It's great
Very
to see charming.
I must say it's refreshing, and it must be fun to work with him too, because we have a lot of directors and actors and some very famous directors who kind of sometimes have thesis and pontificate about directing. For you, it seems like just it's an assignment. Get it done. You don't seem to sweat it very much.
Well, I've been doing it a long time, and if you take show business too seriously, you end up, you know, you hear a lot of craziness. That's why I find a lot of young people, and I always say it's a joke, but it's true. Young people are great if you find them on their way up and before rehab. There's a window, and you get them in that window, you got it.
All right, the play is called Billy and Ray, a terrific look at the making of the great movie Double Indemnity. It's opening at the Vineyard Theater, if I'm not mistaken, Susan.
You haven't even opened, I mean, and you've already been extended. It's
Yes.
selling so well
It's
that you're
true.
already extended.
You hit on a very good subject, I think. No,
Well,
really,
thank
I
you.
mean, you know.
And I'm a lucky guy to have this amazing man to work with.
But we're very exciting together. If we did good here, we do talkbacks after the show.
Oh, how
And
wonderful.
I go into my act, and he knows he's an
I've
expert
been
on.
ventriloquism. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Well, I want to say, Abbott and Costello, it's been great having you on Theater Talk. All right. Mike Bencivenga.
Perfect again.
Venga, I got it.
Venga.
Venga, the writer of Billy and Ray at the Vineyard Theater. Terrific new play directed by the legend of comedy, Mr. Garry Marshall.
Thank you for a nice label. Legend in my own time slot. But it's really very exciting to be in New York and doing a
That's
play.
great. And to see you in the theater.
Yeah.
I'm in the theater.
You have a record of staying in place for a very long time.
I do, but then I am a theater animal. I live in the theater. I'm not waiting to go and do a movie. And also, my interest never flags. I mean, of course you must go if you're not interested anymore.
It's not only, though, that you stay with plays a long time. I mean, you're famous in the theater for never missing performances.
Well, I never missed high school either. I can't, that's in my nature. It has nothing to do with acting. It's just that I want to do what I'm supposed to do.
Even when you're sick or not feeling well? I mean, don't you ever want to
Absolutely.
take a personal day, a
No.
sick day? You just...
No, I don't.
Do you come crawl, even when you're on your last legs, do you still come crawling into the theater to do the show?
Well, I take a lot of care of my health. I learned very early just how much energy, just how much life you have to save for the performance. And I don't let anything change that. I mean, it wouldn't surprise you if I were an athlete or a ballet dancer if I told you that. I would never just walk into the theater and do it. I prepare my life for it.
We did an interview last season with Elaine Stritch here, and she quoted Ethel Merman saying that when you're in a show, you have to live like a nun. Is that the way you have to structure
words
your
to
life?
that effect, yes.
She used a vulgarity that Ethel Merman used, but we're cleaning up for the classy Marion Seldes.
Well, yes, you have to say no to a lot of things. But those things seem frivolous by comparison with acting for an audience. It's a tremendous privilege. The actual fact that people come to see the play you're in, I'll never get over it.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, and the Theater Development Fund's Technical Accessibility Program, which helps provide closed captioning.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.